This week on the Markcast, apparently I've got a special gift waiting for me. And are you going to show it right now, or are you going to wait till the show? Oh, yeah.
Paul has a special gift that we are going to be wearing too when we go to the Grey Cup in Hamilton in December. Very excited about that. Listener of the show, longtime listener Van hooked you up with a prize. Yeah, we have a big show coming up this week. We have Dustin Nielson coming on, TSN 1260. He's doing all the play-by-plays for the games. We're talking to him. I have a standing bet with CFL Hall of Famer Milt Stegall that if the Lions beat the Blue Bombers, he has to change his Twitter profile to a picture of the BC Lions. How do you think my wager? What are my chances?
I mean, better than most teams in the Canadian Football League. Can we at least say that?
We're talking to Reid Wilkins from 630 CHED Edmonton Radio.
What do you think my chances are for the American CFL team, the BC Lions, to actually conquer the Winnipeg?
7%.
7?
I think if you played 100 games, Winnipeg would win 93 of them.
Now, a fellow Reid that spells his name correctly. And then we have Steve Milton of the Hamilton Spectator. Plus, I called out Milt Stegall this week, CFL Hall of Famer and friend of the show. We got the Lions versus the Blue Bombers, social media avatar for social media avatar. It's going to be good.
I think you've got a chance. I wouldn't take the bet. I still think that Winnipeg at this point, just because of their continuity.
We're talking about The Rock making a slight little Instagram tease of XFL action. Stop teasing us, just get to it. We're also discussing how, the Edmonton culture at Jamie Elizondo, not so good right now. And also, we're going to talk about Cody Fajardo being a little soft.
He is
being a little soft.
Blocked
guy.
Blocking us on Twitter, and we didn't even tweet at him.
It's all this week on the Markcast. Fade it down. Fade it down. I programmed our theme music into the Stream Deck that I've been using, trying to eliminate reaching over here to push the button for the music, and it's not clearly labeled, so the Stream Deck handles a lot of things. This is not an ad for Stream Deck, but I love this thing. It's probably one of the greatest things I've purchased.
You that's good. Happy Paul is a happy read, so that's good.
By the way, we're recording this podcast on International Podcast Day. Did you know that?
It's International Podcast Day. It's also Orange Shirt Day in Canada. Thank you for participating, Paul, on September 30th. I wore this anyway for the BC Lions, but then Steve Milton today had an orange shirt on. I've seen lots of teams change their logos to orange shaded whatever. So anyway, this it is to raise awareness for the residential school systems in Canada. About the history and legacies of those schools, and then how every child matters. So that is dual purpose today.
Yeah, I didn't get the memo. Sorry.
That's okay.
Don't shame me for that.
It's okay.
I would have worn an orange shirt in solidarity had it not. Okay?
That's okay. So here's real quick. I am chomping at the bit. So we're going to plug the show real quick, and then boy, oh boy, I got something for you here. Great show today. We have Dustin Nielson. He does all the play-by-plays. Well, not all but he does a lot of play-by-plays for a lot of the CFL games. He is on TSN 1260. Dustin is great. You've seen him. You've heard him on all the CFL games. Reid Wilkins, a fellow Reid, spelled correctly, from 630 Chad. He's friends with Dave Campbell, friend of the show. We talk all about Edmonton, all that stuff. And then Steve Milton has covered the CFL for 40 years. He's with the Hamilton Spectator. He is on as well. So tremendous show, tremendous knowledge. I kept all the interviews good, manageable length. So hopefully everybody will get through that.
Very cool. Very cool.
So congratulations, first off. Big changes in your life. Congratulations.
Thank you. I got a new job. I'm going to be leaving. I'm See, I'm programming right now. I'm trying to program this right as we're doing this. There we go. I am leaving KTLA. My last day will be next Friday, the 8th. And a lot of people are kind of sad to see me go. A lot of people kind of indifferent, but it's been quite a fun time being in television. As I want to say, I've been doing it for almost 20 years, and it's time to move on to something like a little bit longer form stuff, editing, video, doing the motion graphics, the intro that we have here on the Markcast, that kind of stuff. That's what I'm looking to move more into. So thanks for the congratulations on the new gig. I'm really excited. I am stoked to get things going over there.
Yeah, we're excited. So here's what I'm thinking. Things are on the rise for Paul. You got your new job, and we got a gift here. It just came today. Okay. This has been a long time in the works for you. I know when we're going to the Grey Cup, we have our tickets booked. You're worried about getting a little cold in Hamilton. Well, don't you worry anymore with this is courtesy of friend of the show, Van, longtime friend, your custom Markcast black, nice bomber. This is a Reid and Van collab. It's got the Markcast on it. It's an XL. It's got the Markcast on the back.
Wow.
And this is what makes it even better. On the arms,
It's great. That is the greatest thing ever. Shout out to Van. I love it.
There you go. So when we are in Hamilton, I'm going to have, and Dorothy finally got her long promised orange Dragons one, but it's BC Lions colors, right? I mean, I picked right team. So Dorothy and I will have our orange one.
You picked the right time the second time around.
Yeah, and you will have your custom jacket. So I figure we'll give it to you when you come up. But anyway, so Van shipped it here. It just came in hot off the press. So there you go. Very
cool. Thank you, Van, very much for that. Because we've kind of given him a little bit of a hard time here on the podcast. I was told not to bring a jacket to DC because I had a jacket waiting for me. Come to find out I didn't. So Van has made good on that, and I appreciate that, Van, a lot.
Yeah,
you didn't have to, but I appreciate it.
You
Definitely
appreciate it. So, and they shipped it to the house. I didn't even have to go pick it up. So there you go. So thanks a lot.
Even better, especially with the pandemic still going on, still raging.
Yeah. So this is just my little story. But we do have a little bit of preface today. There's not like a ton of like newsy stuff. We have all the game breakdowns, all that stuff coming up. So we are going to preface a little bit today with some of this other stuff. So I am watching America's CFL team, the BC Lions, last Friday. America's CFL team. And I'm sitting there and I'm going back and forth with JJ Adams. He's a local Vancouver reporter, and he's talking about like the defense and the BC Lions, and he's tagging people. And I'm always trying to find like, okay, who can I add and try to get on the podcast. So I see this guy, Ryan. So I click on it. Ryan Phillips, he is the defensive coordinator for the BC Lions. I shot his wedding 3 years ago. He's my groom of Best Made Videos. And he is like, not only like, because I remember when we filmed his wedding, it was a really posh wedding at the Fairmont Olympic, or it was at the Four Seasons. It was downtown Seattle. And I remember them being like, this guy is a big time like player in Canada. And I'm like, who cares? Right?
Fast forward a few years later.
We care a lot. So I reached out to Ryan. I mean, I have his email. I mean, I have like his whole, but I'm not going to utilize all that. But anyway, I'm reaching out to Ryan. I'm sure he's busy right now preparing for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers game. But yeah, Ryan is like 1-2 Grey Cups with the Lions in 06-11. He played 212 regular season games like in a row. Or no, not but fifth all time. There was some record he had where he played like the most games in a row. But anyway, it says Ryan and his wife Adila and their two sons reside in Seattle. Well, I filmed their wedding. So crazy world.
Very cool stuff. Very cool stuff. I noticed it's been throwing me off lately. There's a different logo on the Twitter account. Did you do some stupid stuff again?
Yeah. So and then this is our big through line for today. I tweeted last week. I go, if we did our whole thing with the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast, Tim and Cliffy and all that stuff. Well, I was like, I did a Google search and I didn't see, I said Google, Saskatchewan Roughriders podcast. And one that came up was like back in November of 2020. I go, oh, well, they must have stopped with the pandemic. So I tweet, if only the Saskatchewan Roughriders had a podcast that supported them that we could, do a wager with. Oh my God, the tweets. What about Piffles Pod? What about? Okay, I'm sorry. It's that much. It's like when people reach out to me for wedding pricing and I don't go, well, you dummy, it's on my website. I go, oh, well, here's the link to the website.
Well, because you're professional.
Well, I tell you, they were, and even like the whole reason I do the wagers is to like have fun with people. They were like, I've changed the logo and they haven't interacted since. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I mean, that's your right. I was trying to have fun and build a podcast, right? I'm trying to like build connections. I was just on the Argos Fancast podcast this week. I was on the Puck and Pigskin podcast. Like, we're trying to build connections here. But if you just want to like have me change the logo and move on, that's fine. But that's not fun to me.
Right.
So anyway, I have the Piffles podcast right now, but the big story right now, I messaged friend of the show, Football Canada President Jim Mullen about this. I said, don't mind me just challenging Hall of Famer Milt Stegall to a social media avatar challenge. Paul, did you see my clip at all? I know you had a busy day at work when I sent that over.
No, I did not. Sorry. My apologies.
That's okay. So, longtime listener of the show, Evan, he is a huge Winnipeg Blue Bomber fan. So he messages me. He goes, "Hey, I know I'm kind of small potatoes, but like I would do the Winnipeg Blue Bomber thing with you. You know, if you want to do the logo thing, I'll change my logo." Evan's going through a lot of health stuff. He's really working through. He's a brave guy. And I go, you know what? I'm going to do you one better. So I tweeted Milt Stegall, who's been on the show before, 14-year CFL Hall of Famer. I go, Milt, I'm challenging you. And he accepted. CFL Hall of Famer Milt Stegall when the BC Lions beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this Friday. Milt Stegall's going to change his logo to BC Lions logo. I thought that was fun. Like, who would think that we would be calling out Hall of Famers and they would deal with our shenanigans?
That's very cool, especially your shenanigans, which are, sometimes, they're cheeky and fun. They're cheeky and fun.
Yeah, Reid, in our interview coming up, Reid Wilkins gives the BC Lions a 7% chance to win this week. And I almost threw him off the podcast immediately. I almost just had to end the interview.
Speaking of being thrown off things, what the crap is that? Someone else's Charmin Soft.
Oh, I was like, I thought you were talking about the rock thing. I was like, what's happening? Yeah, remember we did the whole, I was going to pull a clip and then I didn't have time this week. We did the whole thing last week. Cody Fajardo doesn't like people being mean to him on social media. We defended Cody. We said, it's really hard, all this stuff. I tweeted last week. I didn't even tag anybody. I was just, because an article came out, Cody, being mad. And then he uses words like chicken McNuggets as opposed to swear words. So I just tweeted, Cody Fajardo, people make fun of me on Twitter. Also this. I didn't even tag him. I didn't do any hashtags, anything. He blocked me.
Was this on the Markcast account or the verified?
It's on the Markcast one. I didn't tag anybody. I didn't do any hashtags, anything.
Wow, bro.
I mean, he has to have like alerts set up. I mean, I didn't tag anybody. That's what killed me. It'd be one thing if I like tagged him or like the hashtag or tweeted the team. Like I didn't tag anybody.
That's like, man, come on. You see Reid giving people crap online. You have to understand Reid. When he gives people crap online, 98% of it is not malicious. There are some times when you guys get cantankerous with him, and then he'll start throwing it back, and when he's like serious. But every time you see him like poke fun at someone, it's not serious. It's not serious. So, Cody, calm down, man. Yeah. We're fans.
Anyway.
Maybe he's pissed because I did the Spanish pronunciation of his name.
Yeah, because you call him Fajardo. That is why he blocked
it. Which, is what people down here would call him. So,
anyway, we have a little bit of XFL news this week, just in case you're keeping up. So The Rock posted on Instagram, like he said, covering a lot of business, Red Notice, that's his movie, Terramana Tequila, and then XFL. Been waiting for this day for a very long time. My insane schedule is now behind me. Nothing but my taillights.
Okay, well, what are we doing?
There you go. Anyway, so
what are we doing, Dwayne?
If you want your XFL news, there you go. We had it posted on Instagram. So there you go. He mentioned it, but that's like the first time he's mentioned the XFL since like Black Friday last year. So it's been a while. It's been a hot minute.
When was Black Friday last year?
Like November 27th or something.
Okay, I'm just saying, like that was a pretty significant week. Week of November. Not only did he mention the XFL, but he also gave me a shout out for my birthday.
That was all in the same. Remember that? That was like
the time that The Rock sent a fleet out on me. Yeah, that was cool.
We're getting to the point where on Facebook I'm getting notifications of like the old clips that we posted, and the things that we used to talk about were just like completely asinine compared to what we're doing now.
We're getting a lot better.
It's all about growth.
So, CFL week started early, I guess, last night. I'm seeing Tuesday. No, two nights ago, Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Of course, this is airing on Friday. We're recording Thursday. Tuesday night game, the REDBLACKS won. Congrats to the REDBLACKS. They found some offense, beating up on the Elks 34-24. Aren't you really glad you made that decision to leave the Elks now?
I am very glad. We have some other stories coming up about Edmonton in the show. This was wild. Ottawa has been horrendously bad. They barely beat the Edmonton. That's the only team they've ever beat. Taylor Cornelius was starting for the Elks. It's a rookie, but he played last week, did okay, right? Or I think they were on the bye. He played the last time the Edmonton played, did okay. Ottawa scored within the first 3 minutes of the game, and I was like, oh no, because my fantasy picks were all on Edmonton, my pick'em games were all on Edmonton. I just thought I was Job in Arrested Development, I've made a terrible mistake. So anyway, we have some stories coming up about that, and then we go into a lot of the Edmonton of it all with Reid. That's obviously he covers Edmonton, and then Dustin has some thoughts on that. But really, like when you lose to the worst team, it doesn't say a lot about your franchise in football.
True that. Very true.
But big games coming up. Obviously Friday night here we're going to have the Lions hosting again Blue Bombers. We obviously all watched that game last week. Remember where were the exciting CFL games, and then they found us. You even watched the game. You tweeted. You go, this is exciting.
Yeah, I was watching. Like I had some downtime. I started watching. I was like, wow, this is really picking up. This is like Anchorman. Boy, that escalated quickly.
It did.
I was surprised at the comeback that Saskatchewan put on there.
Yeah, ridiculous. Anyway, so we have our logo, and then Alouettes at Hamilton. Hamilton seems to be doing well at home. We talk about that coming up, and then obviously Roughriders at Stampeders. Stampeders have really got to figure things out right now, or else they're going to be on the outside of the playoffs looking in here coming up. You see, obviously the pick'em here I copy where all the riders are taking the teams here.
Yep, it looks like only one person, Chris O'Leary, is picking your BC Lions to pull the upset there, and then only one person, Pat Steinberg, picking the Stamps to pull it off against the Roughriders. Interesting.
But it's the curse of the CFL riders, right? You see Edmonton, they picked Edmonton all the way through, and then the upset. So that's kind of the joke. It's like if they go all in on one team, everyone had the Lions last week and then they lost. So, it's kind of like the curse of the CFL rider. But Pat Steinberg, we're working on getting him on the show again here. He's always kind of an outlier with his picks, but I appreciate him.
Very cool stuff. Moving on now, though. Jamie Elizondo, Coach Elizondo, is embarrassed by the Elks' performance and lost to REDBLACKS. Well, we're embarrassed by your take on the XFL. He said they played really poorly in all three phases. He's embarrassed. He's disappointed and obviously frustrated. I mean, you lose to the REDBLACKS. It's kind of embarrassing.
Something is awry. We have some more stories coming up here, pandemic-related stories with Edmonton. That's been the whole thing. There's only one team that's had any issues with any of this stuff. There's just something is going on. I thank God every day that I've gotten off this Edmonton bandwagon. I mean, I love Dave Campbell. I love Reid Wilkins. I love all the people that cover. I can love the players and the media, but hate the team. Hate the team.
Isn't the Edmonton the one that was talking about like culture changes and stuff like that? Mm-hmm. That's for the culture changes are for the worst apparently over there.
Spoiler alert: they cut Kenny Stafford. Right? They said he wasn't a cultural fit. Guess who scored the first touchdown for Ottawa against Edmonton?
Kenny Stafford.
Yeah, funny how that works out.
Burned. It's like the curse of the Yankees. Like they let someone go, like they let a pitcher go. Like what's his name? Crap. I'm drawing a blank. Pardon me. I can throw him in. Sonny Gray. They let Sonny Gray walk after he becomes a free agent. He goes on, starts pitching lights out again. They let what's his name? J.A. Happ walk. He goes and starts pitching lights out. And like, it's always the curse. Like you let someone go and they go, okay, well, I'm going to show you, and they do it against you.
And talking about those Mariners, I mean, can we just? I know this is a CFL podcast, but this is tremendous times in Seattle sports right now.
They are exciting to watch, and dude, they're like, people are like, I wouldn't want to face the Cardinals in the playoffs. I don't want to face the Mariners in a 1-game playoff. But if things go well, that looks like it's probably going to be the case. My Yankees against your Mariners, and we're going to see what happens there with that. But what I'm really hoping for, this is what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping the Seattle Mariners sweep the Angels. Then I'm hoping the A's sweep the Astros. Then I'm hoping the Yankees, make the playoffs after that. They got to win 4 games. And so if those three things happen, the Yankees have to win out. The Astros lose all 3 games to the Athletics, and the Mariners sweep the Angels. Guess what? The Mariners don't have to play in the wild card.
Well, there you go.
They're into the 4-team because they're division champion at that point.
If the Mariners play the Yankees, we need to make a bet with Jim Mullen. We'll figure out something, and we'll all do. It'll be good. It'll be good.
Make a bet.
Anyway, not social media avatar, whatever. We'll figure it out. Not good news here. BC Lions, Marcus Sales, he's out for Friday's game, defensive back. That's the big thing with the Lions last week too. I remember talking about Ryan Phillips, my former groom. Best maybe this. Just stops they had, all that stuff in the schemes that he was working out, but obviously not great. You want to have BC Lions have all their weapons going up against Winnipeg, but it just was tremendous to see all the shout outs that Ryan, like every time that we saw Ryan during the game, I'm like, there's Ryan. So very exciting times here, but yeah, not good for market sales.
Very cool stuff. By the way, 1-zip Yankees right now. They're playing in Toronto. Apparently the ball just landed in Hamilton.
That's funny.
Hamilton.
Yeah. Did you see this Hamilton? And now we're up to 18,000 for sports games. It was at 15. They're increasing it. Because again, Grey Cup's coming, so we got to figure. I was talking with Steve Milton off camera, trying to figure out media stuff, and he's like, "Well, they probably don't know yet." Because like we could either technically go like maybe as media or as fans to the game, and he's like, well, they're still trying to figure out like the press room and all that. But Steve, I think Steve could help us out too. I mean, we have some other emails, but I feel good one way or another. But yeah, up to 18,000.
We'll definitely be there in one facet or another. Of course, Casa de Markcast right on the lake there. It's going to be a great time. So
I will be there with a bullhorn outside the gate. If we don't get tickets, like I will be there with a bullhorn podcasting live from outside.
We're just keep playing the theme song over and over till it is. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We're going to play it over and over again until they let us in.
Yeah. You see this, Jason Moss, the Saskatchewan Roughriders defensive coordinator, didn't realize social media negativity bothered Cardi for sure this so much. I said, well, it didn't surprise me now either. He had a big, I just thought this funny now, like even the like offensive coordinators are talking about this.
It's like, man, I get it. Like it sucks. It's a terrible cesspool sometimes social media is, but at the same time, it's like, man, you're in the place you're in because you can do what these people that are talking trash about you online can't do. That's what you have to realize is that like there are some people online that like to say things about baseball and act like they know more about baseball. And I know for a fact that they've never stepped foot on a baseball field or played the game. So it's like, just got to block that stuff out. When someone tries to gatekeep you or tries to criticize you, you have to realize like you are in a position that they are not in and they will never be in. So they can't criticize you. It's one thing if Aaron Rodgers tweets about you. It's another thing if Reid Johnson tweets about you. Toughen up.
Means a lot more. No, I will say the only thing more toxic than CFL Twitter, because as you know, I'm a Washington football team fan. Washington football team Twitter is the most toxic Twitter. They are crazy.
Doubt it. Totally doubt it. Did you see what was going on with Tampa Bay? All 11 of them.
I saw it. Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty tough.
Anyway, Cody, stay off there. Stay off. Got all this stuff. This is a good story. I just thought this was interesting. Dane Evans, he's injured right now, but he's one of the Hamilton quarterbacks. He was opening up about his Native American I can't speak because of my braces, ancestry. I just thought this was interesting, like giving more, he goes, I look like a bald white guy, but on his father's side, his great-grandmother, Doris Jean, she was the last fluent speaker of the Wichita language. I just think it's interesting, like anything to give more color to these players, right? To give more background to them. I talked with Dustin about this in the interview as well. Like, it's like when we had Kevin Kugler on that did the spring league games. The research you have to do for these players, because not everyone knows their stories, right? Like everyone knows Brady versus Belichick this weekend, but not everyone knows about Dane Evans' like Native American past, his family lineage. I just think that that's cool to have stuff like that.
Definitely on a weekend like this, that's kind of bringing awareness to the rural schools, the residential school system in Canada. So that's really cool.
Yeah. This was interesting. Obviously we recorded last week with after the Panthers game and Christian McCaffrey went out. Chuba Hubbard played. Just some comments from Matt Rule talking about how that's really his time to step up right now. Panthers are rolling. I mean, Christian does a lot of heavy lifting for them, but Chuba is kind of that next guy in line now. And Matt Rule said, "I told him at halftime, this is why we drafted you. This is your moment." So obviously, heaven forbid we talk about XFL players in the CFL, but I am excited to see a Canadian player excelling in the NFL.
Did you realize that like there would be one undefeated team in the NFC South by week 3 and it wouldn't be the Buccaneers? Did you ever think that in your life?
Who is the undefeated in the NFC South right now? The Panthers. Yeah, I'm stupid. Yes. Remarkable. Well, but I mean, they've strength of schedule. I'm like debating people like, they're like Denver is on top of the world. I'm like, Denver beat the Jets. Like Denver beat, like you need to play players. Like the Raiders matter because the Raiders beat the Steelers at home. The Raiders beat the Ravens on Monday Night Football. Like their 3-0 matters more than like the Saints 3-0 that beat the Texans without their quarterback.
And I mean, the Rams are a really good team. The Rams are a really good team.
Yeah.
Matthew Stafford is finally like, yay, I get to play with a really good team.
Tremendous. I mean, that's. I think they got the Bucs number. I mean, they crushed them. What do you have, five passing touchdowns, Matthew Stafford? Like
Something like that.
It's crazy.
So that's why they went out and got Richard Sherman, obviously.
That is wild. Like,
right.
Also, that Richard.
You mad, bro? I'm like we were up there when that was all going on. How like Tom Brady was talking trash to Richard Sherman, saying, "Come see me after the game," and it was like, "I'm seeing you after the game. You took an L." So there's always been a little bit of, but now apparently that's who recruited Richard Sherman to the Buccaneers. It's interesting.
$2.2 million for a year.
I'm glad Tom Brady finally respects Richard Sherman. Yeah. I'm sure he always did, but just now it's like clear as day. So moving on.
Would you believe that another Edmonton Elks player was in COVID protocol?
I wouldn't. I seriously wouldn't.
This is the only team that's had any issues. That's what's crazy to me is like, I get not all the teams are at like 85%. Like they don't, we don't have all the exact numbers, but it's amazing to me that there's still like one team is the only team that's really had any issues. And they've had 17 players now entering the COVID protocol. That's
the culture they wanted, man. You just got to let them have their culture.
Yeah, I don't want to get too political on this, but it is interesting. So, David Beard, he's in the COVID protocol. And then it also came out this week that the Edmonton GM, Brock Sunderland, he has medical exemption from getting he doesn't have to get vaccinated. He's had multiple doctors do whatever. And so, like, Rod went on the big thing about this week. I don't want to get, like, super whatever, but it's, like, weird. Edmonton's not doing this. They're not at the thing. He's not. They're the only team that always keeps coming back to them.
Can someone explain to me what the medical exemption would be for this thing?
If you have like allergies to the thing, is what I've seen. There's a couple different reasons.
Allergies to an mRNA thing?
I guess whatever they use in the thing. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I don't want to get too like I don't like questioning people whatever, but it's like when there's smoke, there's fire, and it's like it is flaming from Edmonton, like all of these issues, and it is remarkable to me that they haven't got this under control.
Completely. Montreal Alouettes have fired their defensive line coach, Todd Howard. He was with the Saskatchewan Roughriders from 2013 to 14. Then went to Winnipeg, and he's the defensive line coach. Doesn't seem to like kind of catch on anywhere for a pretty long time. He won a Super Bowl with the St. Louis Rams.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then with the Riders, I just thought this was interesting. I mean, I thought Alouette's defense looked really strong like the first couple weeks, and then they've really been struggling to get consecutive points going. But obviously, they're working on things. Toronto brought in Chris Jones, to work on their stuff. So it's interesting that even in this segmented, shortened season, that like we're still making all these moves. Right? Like I would just kind of like get through the season, but I mean, clearly these teams like Alouettes are playing to win. So
very, very interesting stuff. Week 8 ratings are in from TSN and ESPN2. Saskatchewan and BC topped with 618,000 viewers. Very cool stuff for them because that was an exciting game. That's when I was, actually was like, wow, this is like picked up really well.
And then quarter of a million on ESPN2 in the US because so that had 900,000 viewers on a Friday night. I mean, I think that is tremendous ratings for that, for the CFL, for a late game on a Friday night. But I thought that was at the 250,000 on ESPN2 because that's like people like me, right? That we don't live in, we don't have TSN. So I thought that was a tremendous number for that very exciting game. I thought that was.
And I mean, like, people have said we don't need the American market, but you just guys just picked up 250,000 viewers from the American market for having your game on. That was really exciting, by the way. Mm-hmm. Do more of that. Americans will pay attention and you can get more money. It's like, it's all cyclical, folks. It's all cyclical.
It's like I reach out to the Pillfuls podcast. So we're all trying to, but no, they don't want to deal with it. That's fine. That's good. I get it. It's the Canadian way. There was twice as many people in the Red Blacks this week for the victory than last week. Remember, it was the big torrential downpour last week. They had like less than 5. They had like 5,500 or something like that. But back up to 1,200. A Tuesday night. It's not like great, but at least they bounced back when it wasn't like a torrential downpour.
Very cool stuff. Trade deadline set for October 27th. That's when at 5 p.m. Eastern, we're going to see what's been going on with that. Maybe we'll do something special that day to try to, lead up to it. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a live show. Who knows? Ooh, Reid's getting all excited. Of course, the trade deadline before was October 9th, 2 seasons ago, but of course, with a shortened season and having it a little later, that's why they've kind of adjusted like that.
Yeah. This is interesting. This Football Canada thing. I have the doc seems longer just because there's a lot of photos on this. Have you seen this reimagined Football Canada logo?
I have. Isn't that someone that's related to Jim Mullen?
It's Jim Mullen's nephew.
Very
and so because obviously BC did the big thing a couple weeks ago. They redid the BC Lions logo. We had the shirts that now people remember those shirts that they were giving away at the game. People are now like knocking them off, like doing knockoffs online. I'm like, you are a horrible person. Like you are. This horrible is because all the money is going to charity. Like all the money that the BC Lions are making from that, it all is going to benefit. Like they're not making anything, and so like you're selling knockoffs of this charity T-shirt. Like horrible person.
It's like how RotoWare did the thing where they like took the design from the Dave Parker Foundation and made their own shirt with the New York Yankees involved. It's like those shirt sales go to the Dave Parker Foundation, and RotoWare was just like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then of course they fixed that. They're like, okay, fine. We'll give some of the profits to, that's just so low class to me. Like that's scummy. That's really scummy.
But this is exciting. So the new logo, I'm going to keep the photos here. I'll put it up on the thing because it's a cool logo. It was Jim Mullen's nephew, Grant. I have the name on here. Colton Grant. But what's cool is this logo is going to be available on merchandise Football Weekend in Canada, which is also known as Markcast Invasion of Canada Weekend, which is October 15th and 16th. So I think Jim Mullen's going to be pretty busy that weekend that we're coming up. But anyway, that is going to be Markcast in BC Day, October 16th. So
very cool stuff. By the way, I think our former boss just texted me. Yeah. He's got some of that per diem work going on across the street, Reid. You know what I'm talking about.
I just copied this thing to get the whole story on here. You see this Winnipeg thing. So they're doing something similar. Do you want to read this?
Apparently he's very superstitious as
before that, about the logo.
Oh yeah, they're doing very similar. Okay, cool. So that's kind of the same Indigenous kind of embracing of the Is that what I'm looking at? It's like hard to read the text.
Sorry. I just copied this. So Winnipeg, they redid their logo. They're honoring September 30th as well for National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and the Orange Shirt Day. They are unveiling a new blanket-themed logo designed by local Anishinaabe artist and star blanket designer Danae Sinclair. And it's the Winnipeg W, reimagined, right? It's kind of like a tapestry blanket. I'll put the picture up. So really cool, but just like, this is really cool. Like, I know the NFL is doing that as well, right? With the Hispanic market, doing like the Enye on the NFL logo, like they're trying to do, it's cool to me. And especially as something that's so like, in the history of like Canada and everything else, to be embracing all this. And I think it's just a really smart way to do it on social media.
I honestly feel like this is way more important than like when, the Brooklyn Nets roll out the Los Nets jersey. I think this kind of stuff is way more important because it draws attention to a very dark moment for Indigenous people in Canada, and really kind of like it's kind of like a peace offering. It's kind of a reconciliation, and I think this kind of stuff is way more important than catering to a certain demographic just because it's a certain demographic. So
yeah.
Speaking of Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the Jets head coach Paul Maurice is very superstitious, as am I, and he says that he single-handedly won the Blue Bombers the Grey Cup in 2019. So like
basically like his wife is a fan. He wasn't his wife. So like maybe, Dorothy is kicking me out of the house, right? When she's watching the Winnipeg Blue Bombers games. Not really, but he would actually not be allowed inside the house when his wife was watching the Blue Bombers play. So he used to turn on the TV. It's not supposed to be on. So he said, I may have single-handedly won the Blue Bombers the Grey Cup. I never got a thank you. And so he is presumably not watching the games again this year because that is kind of the chalk pick, obviously, for the West Division for the Grey Cup.
Interesting stuff. Spring League, though. What's this?
Well, this is interesting. So we just have a couple notes here, and then we're going to get out of here. You're going to be happy because we're going to do the giveaway next week. I have everything. I didn't have time to draw the names. I'm dealing with corporate deadlines right now. So we have all the names, everything. Please still comment on the video. Give us, feedback and questions and everything. But I will do the giveaway next week. We have everybody in for all of that. But remember the time that Justin Fields came and debuted for the Bears and then got sacked 9 times?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I just thought it was funny that now the Bears are trying out Matthew Sexton. He's I think he's a wide receiver. But then they're doing Ryan Willis, who is in the Spring League as well, who plays quarterback.
Interesting stuff. I mean, the Bears need to shore up that offensive line before they start, thinking that Justin Fields is a problem. I mean, look what Sam Darnold's doing, for example.
Yeah. No, I mean, that game was horrendous. I watched most of that game, and I felt very bad for Justin Fields. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting. Bears making it work, but good for Matthew Sexton and good for Ryan Willis, both the spring league guys before trying out for the Bears. So
very cool stuff. All right. So with that being said, we're going to toss now to Reid interviewing Dustin. Reid and Steve, it's weird that two Reids are on the show this week, but that's what's going to happen right now. We're going to toss to that, and we'll have a commercial break before that. But yeah,
and then we're done. And then we're done. So
Reid will take you out with those interviews, and we'll see you next week.
Well, Dustin Nielson, thank you so much for coming on. I've so enjoyed watching, listening to you call many of the CFL games this season so far. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, man. Thanks for having me. Kind of been watching your work from afar and happy to be a part of it this week.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it. Busy man, lots of different things going on. How has the season been going for you? Our episode last week was where have all the exciting CFL games gone? Then, of course, the Lions and Roughriders go down to the last second. So, I mean, how have you thought the season's been going so far?
First of all, I'm just happy to have CFL football back. I mean, after not having it for a year, I just think for the entire country, it's great to have it back again. It's great for me to be involved in it again as well. And, I've had a few pretty good games so far. I know, and it's pretty widely known that, there haven't been a ton of great games this year, but the first game I called this year came down to like a tackle at the 1 yard line here in Edmonton, which was a great finish. And then, I had that last game with the Riders and Lions, which was tremendous as well. So I think, probably the first 4 or 5 weeks, and this is what happens usually if you don't have a preseason, let alone having not played all of last year either. I think a lot of the offenses we're still trying to figure out their timing. There's a lot of new faces around the league as well, or different faces and new places that we're still trying to get used to. So I think the second half of the season, and there's a few teams that might not live up to the billing that are struggling here out of the gate or through the first half of the season. But I think we're going to get some really good matchups in the second half of the season. And I would expect the CFL playoffs to be just like they always are. And they're usually pretty darn good.
When you go into calling the games, and I've talked to other people that, when it's non-NFL, right, where like everybody knows Tom Brady's story, right? When you're going in and you're calling a lot of these games and learning about these players, how much research are you putting into that, to figure out like to do a little bit more of the story behind everybody and let the audience know maybe these people that the audience doesn't know about?
Quite a bit at the beginning of the year for sure, because at the beginning of the year, I really don't know much about half of these guys, right? So, before I can kind of share their story with, everybody watching, I've got to kind of learn it myself. So the beginning of the year, and the way I prep, I kind of lay out all of the, like I'll have my own sort of customized depth charts of all 9 teams. So I was building that at the beginning of the season. And then as you move from game to game, now it's a lot easier because I don't have to worry so much about recognizing who's who. I can kind of tell who everybody is just by the way they play now, which is nice. So, it does allow me time to maybe focus a little bit more. One story that we can relate to here is Ricardo Lewis with the Riders. Like, we've been waiting for him to kind of have a big game. He played 2 or 3 already. And we had on the TSN broadcast, we've been saving that clip of him and Nick Marshall for like 3-4 weeks from their time in college. And then we played it before he actually scored his touchdown, but he scored his touchdown not shortly after we played it. So, that's one of those storylines. We'll have a bunch of those kind of kicking around, figuring out when we can fit him in for a lot of these guys. I don't have to give a lot of background on, Michael Riley or Cody Fajardo or Zach Collaros. But there's a lot of guys, even from week to week, popping up that come with a big story, like Ricardo Lewis. He's good buddies with Jarvis Landry. He was in Cleveland. He gave Landry his number when Landry rolled in. Their families are close. So, there's a lot of players like that have, 4 or 5 stops along the way before they even get to the Canadian Football League. And nobody up here has ever really even heard of them. So, yeah, there's a lot of great stories. And with the way football broadcast is, you can try to fit in. I wish we had time to fit in more, to be honest with you, of some of these guys, maybe, when they make a big play or something along those lines. Like, Damon Webb, who had that scoop and score at the end of the Lions Riders game. Like, nobody really knows who he is at all. And we didn't have time to lay it out there because he doesn't really play on the defensive side of the ball, but he's on special teams and picked that one up. So there's a ton of stories, which is why myself and my co-host, Lieutenant Eric, on our show up here in Edmonton, he is a very big supporter of having like a CFL Films or like something more in depth for the Canadian Football League where we can tell a lot of these stories, which I think would be a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, I mean, we were at dinner last night for one of my nephews, and I guess it's my stepfather. I don't know. He's somehow related to, but he's like, no, wait, what are we podcasting? What are we? I'm like, well, see, I was like, we cover these leagues. I said, because then when these guys show up in, and you see them around, it just helps build that character of who they are, right? Where they came from and seeing those stops along the way. But yeah, trying to explain, he's like, why do we care about this? Or why do we care about fan control football? Or like, what's it's like, well, no, because those players move around and it's cool to see those stories,
Well, yeah, like Taylor Cornelius was in the XFL with Jamie Elizondo. He was there with Jalen Tolliver, who Jalen Tolliver is now here in Edmonton as well. So there's a connection there. And, if you look hard enough on most teams, either who they're playing against, like some of the opposition, they've played together in college. So there's a lot of ways to wrap our heads around this thing. And I think that's one of the cool things about the league, to be honest with you.
So, good games last week, right? We had Alouettes and Argos. We had, Lions and Roughriders. What happened in Ottawa on Tuesday?
Oh, buddy, if I had the answer to that, I might be a coach in this league. Like, I have no idea. Being based in Edmonton and doing a show in Edmonton, I can tell you right now that everybody here, myself included, was expecting Edmonton to come away with a victory. I think they were, a 7.5 point favorite. I do a sports betting podcast. Me and my co-host, we were locked in at the 7 points, thought for sure. Because Ottawa, even with Davis and Nichols this year, could not do anything offensively. And we're sitting there at the beginning of the season with Paul Lapolice, and Lapo's an offensive genius in this league. Like, you're thinking, okay, this guy, what's going on here with Lapo? Turns out maybe it was just the two quarterbacks that weren't able to execute his system, because I thought Evans was terrific in that game. And Edmonton shot themselves in the foot way too many times in that football game. They couldn't tackle anybody, which I think has to be frustrating for them. And it's not the first time that's popped up this year. Their special teams, and any special teams against Edmond might not look that great, but Edmonton special teams haven't really looked good at all in any aspect of it the entire season. And then, I give a ton of credit to Ottawa for the first drive of that game on Tuesday. They mix in the pass from Davis down to former Edmonton football team member Kenny Stafford. Big play for him. And then, they punch it in not long after. And then Edmonton gets the ball back. Cornelius throws it to Ellingson, and Ellingson fumbles. And it was like, at that moment, you're like, what is going on here? Greg Ellingson is one of the most sure-handed receivers in like the history of the league. And it was a low pass, but he picked it up. He secured it. And then he went and he, had that ball knocked out right before he went down. And that's just, I don't care who you're playing. I mean, if you give anybody the ball when you're already down and all the momentum's on the other side, and you give them the ball within the 30 yards of the end zone, that's not the ideal way to start that football game. And then, like the Elks actually, they hung around. They were down by a touchdown on that drive when Cornelius threw the interception in the end zone. And then that was kind of, and I know Jamie Elizondo talked about it after the game. That was the big one that, they had some momentum. They were still in the game, had a chance to tie it and keep it close. And then that interception. And Cornelius is an interesting study because he threw for over 300 yards. He threw for 3 touchdowns, had that interception, which he would probably like back. He had another guy wide open that he probably would have got a pretty good chunk with. And then he had, interception late. I'm not going to read too much into that. So I don't think he's to blame for this loss, this last one. Everything else in the team didn't look very good. So lots of questions there, but overall for Ottawa, and they're going to have to put together a run, and it was going to be easier said than done. But I think that's something at least to build on here as you transition at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad because obviously Taylor, coming from the XFL, right, you want to see a little bit of success coming from America, right? And then, played decently last week, right? And it just seemed like Coach Elizondo was just incensed, like was so upset, called it the worst first half he's ever seen, was just, not to do too much of a deep dive on Edmonton, but, he comes in, clear shop, Derek Dennis's of the world, right? Kenny Stafford's. Yeah. Like, what is happening in Edmonton now for them just to seem like they're falling apart?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the general manager was taking a lot of heat on my morning show the day after that loss because, Elizondo, Milanovic was his guy. And Milanovic goes down to be a quarterback coach with the Colts. But Sunderland has always had a connection with Elizondo. They've been together in the past. I think he originally wanted Elizondo here in the first place, but Elizondo was in the XFL at the time, decided to go that route. So Sunderland's been taking a little bit of heat, at least from the fan base up here in Edmonton and some members of the local media. But it's interesting because they get hit with the COVID thing early in the season. And you think that might rip a room apart a little bit, right? Unvaccinated guys versus vaccinated guys. They get it together. They end up having to reschedule this game. So they got those 3 coming up in November, like in 7 days, which is crazy. But then they come out of that break and they win back-to-back games. And all of a sudden you're thinking, well, what's going on here? Like, I remember going into that broadcast, Glenn Suter and I, before the game, were like, we're going to learn a lot about this Edmonton team. Like, let's see what they're made of. And they come out and look pretty good coming out of that break. Trevor Harris has had a couple of really big games so far this year. I know Elizondo wants them to be a little bit more aggressively offensively when he's in at quarterback. And I think that's kind of why he likes Cornelius, because he wants to take some shots down the field. But, they're an interesting study right now, the Elks, because especially offensively, they've got the tools. They've got a front 4 and defense that should be providing probably a little bit more pressure than they have, but it just it hasn't seemed like they've clicked as a group just yet, which is strange to me because they've had a couple of moments that really should have brought them together.
And I get, it's a first year regime, all that, but all these teams are dealing with time off and shuffled rosters. I get that they have a lot more of moving pieces that have come in, but it just seems like, and even I saw Kenny Stafford, retweeting people talk about, not being a culture fit. It just seems like there's a little bit of tension there that I would like to be a fly on the wall for some of those conversations that have happened.
Yeah. Maybe it'll come out at some point, but they've did a pretty good job keeping, at least here in Edmonton, not a lot is leaked out about, from within the team. And whenever, was it Armando Sewell who had those things to say about Trevor Harris? Most of the guys on the team, when it was brought up, had his back in that situation. But, it is kind of interesting to see some of those things pop up outside of the market. Now, it's tough because, if somebody moves on from another team and it's not their choice, I'd be a little bit bitter too, right? And I'd probably be willing to retweet people seeing nice things about where I am now or bad things about where I was before. So I don't want to read into too much of what's being said by these guys who aren't here anymore. But at the same time, the end result of the product that is still here would lead to some question marks just on its own.
So the game I really want to talk about here, coming up tomorrow night, tonight as as this airs, my team, America's team, the CFL, the BC Lions, I have a standing bet with CFL Hall of Famer Milt Stegall that if the Lions beat the Blue Bombers, he has to change his Twitter profile to a picture of the BC Lions. How do you think my wager? What are my chances?
Better than most teams in the Canadian Football League. Can we at least say that? Probably. We saw what they did to the Riders, and I still think that Riders-Lions game was so good. I thought that was just a terrific football game.
They gave that away.
League, wherever, that was a great game. But a shanked kick basically set up Cody Fajardo to put together a nice drive. But they should. You're right. The Lions should have sealed that game away. Now the Riders, in the end, really didn't manage to keep it close against the Bombers. They could not generate anything offensively. I do think Michael Riley, they don't run the ball, or they can't run the ball, or I don't know what's going on with the running game. But Riley's got Burnham and he's got Lucky Whitehead. And now he's got some other good options there too as well. But Burnham and Whitehead are probably as good as it gets in the Canadian Football League. Statistically, it looks that way. And just the way they mesh together with Lucky doing what he's capable of doing and Brian doing what he's capable of doing is deadly for Riley. And Riley's had this before. Here in Edmonton, he had a Darius Bowman and Darrell Walker in his early days. He had Fred Stamps with a Darius Bowman for a while. He had Brandon Zilser when he was here with Walker. I think he knows how to work those two guys. But this Winnipeg defense is by far the best positional group in the Canadian Football League. I don't even think I don't think there's an offense that dominates more than any of the other offenses. This defense is a nightmare for opposition quarterbacks. So they're going to have to give Mike Riley time. I know Michael Riley can get out of the pocket and scramble, and he's good at that. And he makes plays. But when you got Jeff Coate and Jefferson coming at you all night, it's going to be an issue. So I do think the Lions will keep it closer than the Riders were able to do. I think the Bombers are in a class of their own. I really do. I mean, they've only lost one game since Zach Collaros took over as a starting quarterback. And my co-host up here in Edmonton, he's a big time Riders fan. So he's like, let's not, I mean, the Bombers, they can be beaten. And sure, they can be beaten, but you're going to need a near perfect game and you have to look after the football. If they can look after the football, that's something that you might be able to take advantage of. But, the BC defense, man, like I sit here and talk about Winnipeg defense for 20 minutes if you want, but that BC defense is, if I talk about Winnipeg being the best defensive unit in the Canadian Football League, and I believe they are, but we expected that, I would probably describe the BC Lions defense as the biggest surprise in the Canadian Football League this year, because the Lions defense, I didn't think was going to be a difference maker. I didn't think it would be awful, but I didn't really know what to expect. So I thought, in the middle of the pack, sort of a middling defense, but that's not the case. I mean, this Lions defense is terrific as well. They got some playmakers on that side of the ball.
Yeah, it's just I feel like they gave that game away. I mean, I'm a lifelong Seahawks fan, right? And you always feel like, okay, Russell Wilson's gonna figure it out in the end. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter, as long as we're. And I just never felt like they were gonna lose that game until I was like, oh wow, we're really. This is done. I mean, we really missed the extra point. That punt, we're really losing now.
Well, that's the thing. There was a couple of opportunities with the kickers. Camacho missed his first field goal of the year in that game. Did he not? I mean, he was 9 for 9 going into that game, missed a big one. They got it out and then it remained, a 1-score game. And then Flintoff, who was tied essentially with John Ryan at the top of all punter categories. He comes out and I think even on the broadcast, I said, that's a horrible kick.
Yeah,
and it was. And then, when something like that happens, and on top of that, Riley wanted to go for it on 3rd and 2, but that was a long 2. So I didn't think it was a bad idea to kick it away, especially when you got a guy who's averaging 49 yards per punt on the year. And, he just had one go off the side of his foot. And then Fajardo, what did it take? 4 or 5 plays and that ball was in the end zone. So we were sitting there and it was after the interception that Fajardo threw. He tried to find Mitchell Picton and it got picked off. And I think a lot of people at that moment were probably like, yeah, that's probably it. But we went to a commercial break and I looked at Glenn and I said, man, I still think something else big is going to happen in this game, because that's just the way that game went. And then sure enough, we got 2 or 3 of those moments down the stretch. It was just a terrific ball game.
Yeah, it takes a lot. My wife can be excited about Raiders, Ravens, or whatever. It takes a lot to get her into Lions and Riders on a Friday night. But yeah, she was into it. Really quick before you go, I don't want to hold you forever. You've been great. Any last? Who are you taking? Alouettes, Ticats? That early Saturday game, kind of the weird time slot there. Any real brief thoughts about that before you head out, and then we'll get obviously the other one. Yeah,
I think I'd probably take Hamilton in that game. I hesitated a little bit. I did a lot of Montreal games 2 years ago, so I kind of got a soft spot for the Alouettes. They were like my main team in my first year calling games in the CFL for TSN. And I just think Vernon Adams, I mean, he's been inconsistent this year. He'll be the first one to tell you that, but he's still a special talent. I think he's a special talent at quarterback. So, I could see Montreal going in and winning, but I think I'd stick with Ticats. And then that Riders Stamps game is an interesting one because the Riders, they struggle. They lose those 2 to Winnipeg. They get the bounce back. They're in a pretty good spot still in the standings. But Calgary, and I thought this way for Edmonton for a while. And then I saw that loss to the REDBLACKS, and I thought, you know what, maybe the Elks just are who they are. But with Calgary I still look at it and go, with a healthy Bo Levi Mitchell and Kamar Jordan and some of the weapons they have there, I still think Calgary is better than their record leads us to believe. So I think Calgary, if they don't beat the Riders, I think they give them a pretty good scare. So I think that'll be a really good game.
It wouldn't be good for the Lions if the Stampeders beat the Rough Riders. I don't know. Yeah, the Bo thing is fascinating. I think we did a lot of talk last week about that. Just fascinating. What is happening there? It comes. Yeah. The prince that is promised comes back, and then they still can't get anything going. It's been an interesting situation there. So.
Yeah, it has. But he's one of the best we've seen in this league in a long time. So I'm probably, and the team overall was pretty good with Jake Mayer in there as well. And I like Mayer. I think he could be a quarterback in this league, but I don't think he's better than Bo Levi Mitchell is right now. So, I could see Calgary putting together a run here where they get, maybe 3, possibly 4 wins somewhere along the way. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, here come the Calgary Stampeders. Cause I just think they're better than what their record has led us to believe. So I won't be shocked. They're at home. I won't be shocked if they beat the Riders, but it would be classified as an upset.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I should have asked you this before you came on the air. Are you on any of the games this weekend?
Actually, you know what? You caught me on the one weekend. I don't have any games. It's just the way the schedule worked this week. I have a young family. I got like a 4 and a 6-year-old. So it's nice to be home for a weekend. My parents are actually coming up. I haven't seen them in like 6 months. So they're going to come up for the weekend as well. So I'm going to kind of kick back, watch some of these games. And then, I just got a sneak peek at like the rest of the schedule. I'm going to be pretty busy the rest of the way. So I'm going to enjoy this weekend off, and then I'll get right back at it. I got this rematch of the Calgary Saskatchewan game in Regina next Saturday. So that's where I'll be.
That's going to be exciting. Well, thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you out there.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's very exciting to have another Reid on the podcast, another properly spelled Reid Wilkins of Edmonton. How are you doing today?
Well, that's right. Proper spelling is the main thing. I get a lot of R-E-E-D, R-I-E-D. I still don't really understand that one. Once I got an R-E-A-D-E, which I thought was interesting. That I guess that's maybe more common last name. But I don't know if you find this. I do get a lot of R-I-E-D. And I've asked people about that who have, a colleague who is, sometimes you start working with someone new and they leave you a note and they put it R-I-E-D. And I'll be like, why did you do that? Well, I before E except after C.
And in my name.
I'm like, well, I guess, but and in my name would be the other exception.
I get a lot of R-E-E-D. I get a lot of wedding tips made out to Reid R-E-E-D. So yes, it's good. I'm glad to have you on kind of the other half. We've had obviously friend of the show, Dave Campbell, on before. I was a lot higher on the Edmonton football team back when Dave was on the show. And then we've such gone, and now we've transitioned to the BC Lions, who are now proclaiming this America's CFL team. An interesting week of CFL games. First and foremost, what did you make of this Ottawa Edmonton game debacle? Everything that happened?
Yeah, well, really disappointing. And for the Elks, unfortunately now, it's not a one-off or even a two-off that you have a flat performance and make a lot of mistakes and start the game poorly and don't have a lot of imagination offensively. This has become the norm for the Elks. And that's what's frustrating. And look, the Elks were favored going into that game. I think they should have been the favorite. But now, they've lost Ottawa twice. I don't know if you can debate who the worst team in the league is now. I mean, certainly Calgary continues to struggle. We'll see how they do this weekend. But I think for the Elks, it's just super disappointing to see them come out that flat. I mean, you're down 14-0 the previous game to Winnipeg 10 minutes in. But I don't want to say that that's acceptable, but it's more understandable because you got Cornelius making his first start. Winnipeg's awesome. And, they came out and asserted themselves. To be down 14-0 to Ottawa before the game is 5 minutes old. I mean, forget about Ottawa getting to 14. They've had trouble getting to 10 in entire games. And they did it in 5 minutes against the Elks. I mean, the Elks not ready to play. Got burned by the trick play, a fumble offensively. And then it's just, again, incredibly poor special teams. So the Elks are a team now. I don't think you can. To me, there's no doubt with a lot to fix. I certainly don't think it's going to happen in the final games of next season. I think it's going to be a really critical off season for them to make some big changes. I look at the upcoming schedule, and given some of their previous results, I just don't see. You're probably going to have to get to at least 6 wins to make the playoffs. I mean, how do the Elks go 4-3 against Saskatchewan twice, Winnipeg twice, the 3 games in 7 days on the road at the end of the season? So. Just disappointing. Sure, you got an experienced quarterback in, but the loss wasn't on Cornelius. Yes, he missed throws, and yes, he makes mistakes based on inexperience, but he's not giving up kick returns. He's not fumbling the ball. He's not missing tackles.
Yeah, we had filled out our pick'ems and stuff. We had to go early, right? Tuesday, I started Cornelius and fantasy, all these things, and then I see Ottawa. Yeah, it was like 14-0. I'm like, what is happening here? I turned on the game. I was finishing work, and I was like, so unexpected, and I just can't figure out if it was Ottawa doing things well or if it was Edmonton doing things poorly.
Well, that's a good point. You give the other team credit for coming out and winning, and Ottawa came out and. I'll reference that first drive with an aggressive game plan. I mean, they called the trick play with the receiver throwing the pass, and it looks like they just said, "Look, we're we're going to go for it. We got nothing to lose. If there's a team we can jump on, it'll probably be the Elks. So good for them for doing that. Absolutely. And obviously they were, I didn't even realize they'd gone over a season without a home win or something. It was like 11 games or something at home. So that would date back all the way back to 18 then, I guess, or early 19, until they last won a home game. So the frustrating thing with the Elks is kind of like I referenced earlier, not just that they're losing, it's how they're losing with very sort of lifeless efforts, games that ultimately aren't that entertaining. I think to me that the Elks have played decent twice on Labor Day, and the loss to Winnipeg. I will actually give them credit for how they came back after the first 10 minutes against Winnipeg. I mean, they basically played the Bombers even for the last 50 minutes of that game. And I mean, they had the lead 5 minutes into the third quarter, and they took some punches, but they dished out some punches against the Bombers as well. I mean, even the game the Elks won in BC, I don't know if they played great. I think they did enough. I'm still not really sure where the Lions are headed. I think they've benefited from their schedule as well. But that's the thing about the Elks. They fall, when they fall behind, even by 7, it's kind of already territory, as opposed to like, okay, but no big deal. Now they're going to drive down and answer back. They really aren't doing that. Very seldom do they do that.
When we had announced that you were coming on this week, we had a lot of people in the Facebook group say, okay, we're glad Reid shoots it a little straighter, right? And they wanted your take on just the quality of the gameplay so far this season. Our episode title last week was Where Have All the Exciting CFL Games Gone? And obviously Lions Roughriders and the Alouettes Argos Friday were actually pretty competitive, but hey, we can take credit for that. But I mean, what have you thought just so far of kind of most of these games just kind of being a little more plodding this season?
Yeah, I've asked people about that on my show as well. And now I should say, since the Oilers have started up, I haven't seen as much the last couple of weeks in terms of especially being able to watch a full game front to back. I think it is a few things. I do think not having a season last year made a difference, and not having any preseason this year. I do think that makes a difference for the sharpness of the offense. I think in terms of the bigger picture, and the scores are coming up. I mean, you referenced a couple of the games last week, even 34-24 Ottawa and Edmonton. I don't consider that a low-scoring game. I mean, but somebody told me a couple of years ago that the challenge for pass interference was a really significant change. And if you don't play man-to-man defense, you're less likely to give up a big play, and you're also less likely to commit pass interference. So I kind of think a lot of defenses are playing zones and are saying, okay, we'll give you a series of 5-yard passes, and maybe you'll get 30 or 40 yards. But if you throw one incompletion, you got to punt because you're only trying to gain 5 yards at a time. So if your quarterback goes 7 for 8, the drive ends because of the one incompletion, because then it's 2nd and 5, right? And I do think there's something to that. I think Justin Dunk talked to me about defenses are now taking the initiative. They're playing on the balls of their feet, and the offenses are playing on their heels. And yeah, I mean, it's sexy for a quarterback to have a 78% completion, but it's one touchdown and 240 yards. Like you're not pushing the ball into the end zone or trying to make big plays. I think especially in the CFL, you got to reel off. You got to have explosive plays. You got to try to sometimes get 20 to 30 yards on a play. So I think some of it is a mentality. I think sometimes it's too. We saw it in 19, and again this year, a lot of starting quarterbacks got hurt, so that hurts it as well. But I just that's what worries me. There seems to be a bit of a shift in the CFL towards ball control. Don't screw it up. Let's throw high completion passes. But to me, you're playing into what the defense would like if you're doing that too often. And I think ultimately aggressive teams win. I think Winnipeg can do a lot of different things. I think when Hamilton is clicking, they can do that. I just now it feels like after the top 3 or 4 teams, there's a lot of safe, conservative football that doesn't lead to a lot of big plays and therefore doesn't lead to a lot of points.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we've come into this from the XFL of it all. And, a lot of people, when the season started, and it's like, what do you think of the 3 downs? What do you think of all this stuff? And I said, well, it's running a lot of the NFL offense of go for 4 yards or go for 5 yards. But like you said, when you only have 2 downs, you can't go for 4 yards every time. You're never going to get a first down. And I see these, it's 2nd and 10 and they go, and it's like, even if you got the completion, you're only getting 5 yards. Like, I just don't, Gord Randall was on our show. He was talking about the offensive that it's not aggressive enough. It's not pushing the ball down the field. It is just settling for that dump pass when you should be going, but they're not trusting, right? Maybe they're just not trusting the receivers further down the field. And that's also an issue.
Yeah, I think that, and I mean, look, it's such an interesting debate because I know that's easy to sit back and say, well, just throw it deep.
Yeah.
Just throw it for you. I mean, obviously it's a lower percentage pass, but I do think sometimes you have to do it. And again, you might get pass interference, which is as good as the completion. I just don't, and I don't always get what the philosophy is. And certainly yak is important. And, if you had a guy like Terry Vaughn, he could make a living on catching a 3-yard pass and running for 14, but that's easier said than done. And I just wish there was more of that mentality where it's like, hey, we got to spread out the defense. Like, we got to tell the defense we're going to initiate and we're not afraid to punt, every once in a while, because we're going to come back and be aggressive again and again. And I wish there was a little more of that. I know, like, here's the thing, Reid. I remember when I was a kid, like we're talking early 80s. The commentators would always have that saying, well, if you throw a pass, 3 things will happen and 2 of them are bad: incompletion or interception. And I feel like that meant, again, to get back to what I'm saying about the high completion percentage, I feel like quarterbacks aren't just terrified to throw an interception, which is justified. They're terrified to throw an incompletion. Like, okay, sometimes you got to put it. And that was, speaking of Justin Dunk, like, he brought up Ricky Ray when he was on my show. And he said, we're kind of in a Ricky Ray era. And I said, yes, but Ricky would throw the corner pattern to Tucker, or would take a deep shot to Hervey, but the thing that was great about Ricky, he would throw the deep pass and he'd say, okay, yeah, Ed Hervey's covered, but if I throw it to his right shoulder, either Ed's getting it or it's incomplete. Like, Ricky still had a bit of that mentality in him, whereas now I feel like, I can't throw a 50-50 ball. Can't even throw a 60-40 ball because what if the 40 comes through and it's incomplete or intercepted?
Boy, you said it's so focused on that pass interference anymore. Anyway, I mean, even in the NFL, it's like they just throw the ball down. Like, 1 out of 3 times or 2 out of 3 times, they're going to get the PI anyway. And so you're like, God, at least you don't even need to be close to having them catch the ball. Then you just get it in the area, and something's going to happen. I mean, especially the way. I don't know, with as sloppy as some of the CFL play has been. I mean, I certainly don't think that the defense is really on, okay, what is going to be an interference here and what isn't, right? I mean, they're just trying to kind of go at it. I just think you have a lot higher percentage than they're giving it credit for to try to get the ball down.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, for sure.
Yeah. The other games coming up, we have, obviously close to my heart, we have Lions and Winnipeg on Friday. I have a standing bet with Milt Stegall that if the Lions win, he has to change his logo to a BC Lions logo on social media. What do you think my chances are for the American CFL team, the BC Lions, to actually conquer the Winnipeg?
7%.
7?
I think if you played 100 games, Winnipeg would win 93 of them. I'm sorry. I was high on the Bombers before the season, and I just continue to be impressed with them every time I see them play. They don't have a lot of weaknesses, and I think now I didn't get to see a lot of the BC Saskatchewan game. But I think the Lions have still a lot of flaws. I mean, they didn't play great against Edmonton. I know they won in Calgary. There's another game I'm thinking of where I thought, man, oh man, they didn't look that good. I still love watching Michael play. I mean, he's just such a joy to watch with his toughness and his ability to keep plays alive. I don't know. I feel like Riley, with the exception of maybe a couple of years in Edmonton, though he's never had a great offensive line either. Like, I'm not you probably know it better than me, but I just feel when I've watched the Lions this year, I'm like, is that a great old line to protect Michael? Like, give him some time. And I still think like I know Edmonton and Calgary aren't doing well, and I'm not that optimistic about Edmonton anymore, but I don't think that's a safe, 2-game lead on the Stamps for third, if the Stamps get it going, which is easier said than done. So I'm sorry, man. I got to heavily favor the Bombers. And if I'm wrong, I will gladly say I'm wrong, but I got to heavily favor the Bombers there.
Well, and I mean, if BC, I think they had like 7 rushing yards last game. I mean, it wasn't even like an exaggeration. I mean, they literally can't. They literally can't run the ball at all. So except for Michael Riley, scrambling, and they keep saying like he's fast. I'm like, yeah, he's fast for like a 38-year-old. I mean, he's old, right? How old is he? 36, 38?
I don't think he's 38 yet. I think he might be 35. But anyway, yeah.
He's around my age.
He's
I'm
tough,
like, yeah, that's what they say, but that gives up. Thoughts on Lucky Whitehead being just the revelation of everything happening in the world right now? I mean, it really seems like all signs are pointing up for him.
Well, he's an exciting player. I mean, he was with the Bombers before. And I mean, I guess speaking of the Yak, I mean, to me, that's a player that you can just get him the ball, right? And give him a chance to make moves. And I feel like every CFL team used to have 1 or 2 of him. But maybe now he's a bit of a dying breed, or the NFL snaps up more players like that with some of the shifts in their philosophies over the years. But yeah, I mean, he's super exciting for me. Definitely, like I think if I'm going to sit down and watch a Lions game, I like watching Riley because he was here and because he's so good. But I would say Whitehead is definitely a reason to watch the Lions too.
The other 2 games, just some quick thoughts on those. Alouettes issues all year, right? Vernon Adams, sorry. It's like, up, we're down, we're doing whatever. Thoughts on the early Saturday game with that, going into Hamilton again. I mean, Hamilton's on their third quarterback. A lot of issues there.
Yeah, I mean, now Adams is the one guy that seems to just chuck it, right?
Yeah.
that is a bit more old school along the lines of what we were talking about. But yeah, Montreal is so up and down. To me, they're pretty hard to predict. Hamilton's got a lot of good things, but you're right. The quarterback issue is the big one for them. But in Hamilton, with Montreal being so inconsistent, I would still give Hamilton the edge. And then to me, this is now a critical game for Calgary, right? They got Edmonton beat them on Labor Day. Bo comes back for the rematch. Pretty much a must win for Calgary. Like if they would have been sitting there at 1 win, it's probably lights out for them. And they win Edmonton and Bo's back. And then you think, okay, here they go again. And then what was it? They lost was it in Hamilton the next game, I want to say?
Yep.
So now, like Calgary's back at home where they started the season poorly. I think they just have 1 win at home. Edmonton has 0. So to me, this is the one for Calgary where we see, because like I said, I think the Lions can be caught, but Calgary is going to have to mobilize and do it. Saskatchewan is very, very good. They've only lost to Winnipeg. I think that they have certain things that can be exploited. We see Jason Moss as the offensive play. Like I saw that headline the other day. Like Moss gave an interesting quote where he's like, "We need to do some better things on offense, but I'm not going to change my approach." I'm kind of like, well, and that was kind of what he was slammed for here, is that he didn't adapt very well. But to me, this is a big one for Calgary, because I talked to the media guys there and people who cover the Stamps. Like there are some serious questions about Bo. Is this it for him? Like is he past his prime? Is he a little too beat up now? Is the team around him not? Clearly, they're not as good as they used to be. But is there just not enough support for him? So I think if Calgary loses this one, I mean, man, 2-6 over halfway through the season. So I think that's a big one for them. I do think Saskatchewan's going to go in there and win. Well, I'm really writing off the Alberta teams, aren't I?
It's just hard. I mean, I get what they've always said, like where the East is kind of like, I think Rod Peterson calls it like the dog's breakfast or whatever he calls like it's just like, Hamilton still is leading the East. It's just tremendous to me with everything they've gone through with the Jason Mazzolis and the Dane Evans, and now we're Watford, and whether we have in him, and that the fact that they're still leading the East is just astounding to me.
Well, yeah, and that is an ongoing story. I mean, Toronto has surprised me, and they've had some nice wins along the way. I'm just checking the standings here. Montreal at 2-4. That's got to be they still have a lot of home games left, though I don't think they've won a home game yet. But I think, you talk about in the CFL, you have to build a good program, right? And that's what O'Shea has been able to do in Winnipeg. I mean, it's funny, like our sister station, CJOB, carries the Bombers games, and O'Shea's first 2 years, I was talking to somebody who brought, I think he did the coaches. He probably still does it. He did like a weekly coaches show, I think, with Bob Irving. And like Irving had to say, like, okay, like you can't just call into the coach and tell him that you want him to get fired, or I mean, you can ask critical questions, but let's just not yell at the guy for an hour and tell him that he needs to go. But hey, now look, defending Grey Cup champs, favorites this year. Calgary clearly has had a program there going back a couple decades now. This is an off year for them. And I feel like Hamilton has a bit of that, right? Where they've had some athletes to stay there for a while. They kind of know who they're building around. They can still be competitive, even with a quarterback, like you said, even going down to a second or third string quarterback. Maybe you don't win every game, but you're kind of in every game. So that's kind of how I look at I look at Hamilton. I don't think they're as far along as Winnipeg is, but I look at them where they kind of have like a good program there, not just a good team. They have a good program.
This has been great. Before we let you go, I mean, obviously you right, Winnipeg, Grey Cup, right? I mean, we have to kind of imagine. Who do you see on the other side of that field if you had to make your call?
I'm still going to go with Hamilton. I just think that they, going there a couple years ago, probably still upset about losing that game. And I just think the depth and the consistency. I mean, I know they had a couple disappointing games earlier in the season. I think Montreal will probably get third or maybe even second, but they're, again, they're so up and down. And I kind of look at Toronto the same way too. Like I've watched them and it's like, man, oh man, they're good. And then the next game, I'm like, what is going on? Like is this the same team? So I just think, I know in a single game anything can happen, but I think just because of the consistency, the experience, and some of the athletes, I would still go with Hamilton there. Pretty bold, picking the two first place teams to play in the Grey Cup. Well,
but it is, like you said, it is this, the lack of consistency is just crazy. I mean, we've talked before about, sports betting and all these things coming to the CFL. And I'm like, I wouldn't put money on any of these teams right now. I mean, except for Winnipeg, right? I mean, I wouldn't know. It's just crazy. I mean, not one person in the world thought that Edmonton would have lost that game on Tuesday. I mean, it's just astounding to me. If you had to poll 1,000 people, no one would have said that.
Well, I'm sure the most optimistic Red Black fans were still like, great, we're going to lose to the other last place team, because their no-name quarterback is probably still better than our no-name quarterback, but it didn't turn out that way.
Well, Reid, this has been great. I appreciate you making the time and spending some time to talk with us today. And hopefully we can keep you in the Rolodex and bring you back in the future if Edmonton ever wakes up.
Well, that would be good. But I do appreciate you having me. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks. So we have Steve Milton here with the Hamilton Spectator. Thank you so much for coming on and talking a little, obviously CFL and then Hamilton too. It's good to there's not a lot. It's hard for us to get good Hamilton coverage from here, right, on the podcast.
Well, there aren't many media that cover the team in Hamilton anymore. You could say the same about the Southern Ontario market. And if you know anything about the CFL, I'm sure, and you do, Reid, you've been studying this league, you know that the Southern Ontario market, in fact, all the big city markets have been a bit of an issue. It's not an issue in Hamilton itself, but for those of you that don't know the Southern Ontario geography, Hamilton and Toronto are only, and I'll use miles here, we use kilometers, but they're only about 45 miles from City Hall to City Hall. So this is a small town in the shadow of a bigger city. Think in terms of Oakland and San Francisco, or a little more Milwaukee, Chicago, any of those the kind of shadow cities. So they have it's their own thing, but it's part of the larger market. And in Southern Ontario, in media, there just isn't a lot of coverage. And we only have one newspaper in town, and we don't have an all sports radio station here anymore. That's one of the reasons why you have a little trouble getting some coverage out of here. I imagine the same out of Toronto as well.
Yeah, well, we're excited, right? So we have our flights booked for the Grey Cup. We have a wonderful Airbnb on the coast of Lake Ontario out there, right by the stadium, Tim Hortons.
Yeah.
So, well, how has the season been going for you? Our episode last week was called "Where Have All the Exciting CFL Games Gone?" Because
and that's good, very good topic.
And, obviously Friday last week, the doubleheader with the Lions and all that stuff were exciting. But what has been your thoughts on the pace of play so far this year?
It hasn't been anywhere near what we've expected. And of course, we're always comparing here. A Canadian trait, of course, is always to compare and contrast ourselves to our neighbors to the south. And there's no secret that the NFL has borrowed heavily, conceptually, from our game and from the college game. Right. They didn't invent any of the stuff they got going on now that makes us so excited. It came from elsewhere. And it was things they resisted from the college game. And prior to that, the Canadian game for a long, long time. And I'm talking about the scrambling running quarterbacks. We're talking about maybe the lighter outside linebackers, the dual function tight ends that also have to have a little bit of motion to them. All of those kinds of things, passing earlier on downs. And not using the whole 40 seconds. That's a huge part of the NFL now. And it used to be very much a Canadian thing because I'm assuming that people that follow your cast understand that it's a 20-second time clock here. It's done it a little differently, but generally we've had more plays and tend to be more exciting plays because of you have to pass early and downs. Now the NFL's doing it, and so we have we've had that comparison. One of the problems we've had is, and I'm sure this came up on your podcast last week, was that year off was really hard. The league did not play. And then it delayed. And then when there's no exhibition games, there were no preseason games. So a lot of stuff couldn't get worked out during training camps and all of those things. And we have shorter hours. We were coaches here allowed to only have the players 4.5 hours a day because quite often they're not getting paid enough, right, to be here that much longer. Plus, many people, especially the Canadians, used to have other jobs. So that's not the case anymore. They're really, they're full-time athletes. They need to be more on the job. I'd like to see another hour a day. That could help with some of the offense. The other part is stability on the offensive lines. A lot of offensive lines changed because of that pandemic, and there's really only, I would say, one veteran together. And you know what offensive lines are like. It's like, I often compare it to synchronized swimming, right? You have to be together and do the same things. Well, if you're bringing in new people, which almost everybody did, there were a great number of retirements in that period of time. And that's been part of the problem too. Quarterbacks aren't being protected.
Yeah, do you think though we're entering week 9 here, we're in the middle of it, right? Obviously we had the Edmonton game this week.
Yeah.
Should we expect more by week 9? I get week 1, 2, what?
It should be. Well, this is the halfway point. It's a condensed season. There's only 14 games. So most teams have played 7, right? So they played half of their schedule. They should be at this point by now. They should be at the point that you're asking by now. And it's a bit of a problem. This isn't strictly pandemic related. It's been coming for some time. Part of the reason is that we don't go deep enough in quarterback. Hamilton just won 2 games with their third string quarterback. They had to change everything they did. They had to almost win it by defense and special teams and not throwing the ball away on offense. This is an exciting team. Hamilton was extraordinarily exciting, at least as exciting as Kansas City in the 2019 season, as Kansas City has been the last 2 or 3 years, at least that exciting. But they haven't been able to do that because they were down to the third string quarterback. When's the last time in the NFL teams won back-to-back with third string quarterback? 0, in my guess. If it was probably in the 60s. Because you can't practice the person up. Well, one of the problems that we're having, we don't go deep enough at quarterback because many of the types of quarterbacks that have always dominated this game, and they've been able to come in partway through a season and with a half a season, star the next year. So they were number 2 the first year and come in. They're being kept by the NFL now. All right, and they go a little deeper in the roster. They usually have an extra person on it. And often it's a CFL type. Look at all of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. Many of them wouldn't have been in the NFL a few years ago. They would have been up here for a couple of bit. I mean, we've often said Doug Flutie would have been a star in the NFL and not had to come to the CFL. And Joe Theismann and probably Damon Allen probably would have got a big shot down there, and all kinds of them. Even Matt Dunnigan, people like that were stars in college and played that kind of game that wasn't NFL 6'4", straight drop back kind of passer, would have got their chances. We wouldn't have had them. Luckily we did. But we're not getting some of them now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was on the Argos fan cast this week talking to you because obviously I'm in Seattle and the Seahawks, right? And Russell Wilson is very much like you're talking, where he was the exception when he started, like 8 years ago, and now it's every, you got Kyler Murray, you got Patrick Mahomes, you have everyone mobile.
About 10 of them. There are about 10 of them, and I'll tell you that he was Russell was everybody's favorite NFL quarterback. Except, I mean, obviously there were some great quarterbacks, but everybody who followed the CFL loved him. I know that person. I know that game. Everybody used to say up here about him, and of course that's had a great effect here. People, I mean, most of Canada lives within an hour or two drive of the U.S., and of course with broadcast. So obviously you have a very strong Vancouver bent from Seattle, but Winnipeg and Minneapolis, Toronto / Hamilton and Buffalo. I mean, most people in Hamilton who are 50 years or, I would say that from the age of, they've grown up. If they're under 60, they've grown up with the Buffalo Bills.
Looking at Hamilton here, we just had Reid Wilkins on talking. I asked him, I said, who do you take? Obviously Winnipeg, right, in the West, we're presuming for Grey Cup. He took Hamilton in the East. Obviously they've had their quarterback issues, right? Mazzoli went down, Dave Evans. Is Hamilton just that good of a team that they're able to persevere even with all this influx under center?
It didn't look like that at the start. And the coach, who's tremendous, right? And he was on a good stream in the colleges, Orlando Steinauer. He was on a really good progressive stream there out of Fresno State. He was nominated for Assistant of the Year in his only year at college down there. He was on a good track. So this is a very good coach, and he understands the game up here, and he played here. I've known him since he was 22, and he's in his, I don't know, he's 47 or something now. And so there's a bit of a culture here, and they have a lot of the same players. They've lost a lot of players. I think they lost 4 or 5 through the pandemic, through retirement, or 1 or 2 from free agents. But they had a real core, which is odd, which is one of the reasons, of course, Winnipeg is doing so well. They have a core, and they kept it, especially in the trenches. They're winning this league on the trenches. They're the best, combination offensive, defensive line, and nobody else is close in this league. And that's where it all starts. It starts that way at every level of football. But Hamilton's defense is very strong. They can play 2 types of ways up front. They've got a very good front four that they brought completely back, and including the backup, they've made one good Canadian draft choice who's able to step in there and spell the older player who was Canadian. Just to remind people, we have a ratio here. You have to start 7 Canadians. And if one comes out and you're only at 7, another Canadian has to replace him somewhere on that side of the ball. Right. So during the game. So they got really, I wouldn't say fortunate, because they thought they had somebody in this guy, but he's turned out to be what you don't see, a first year player who you can just throw in there and not just as a body, but as somebody who makes. So they have a very aggressive defensive backfield. They lost somebody, an all-star, but they replaced him with a ball hound. So if they can get the pressure and they play aggressively in the backfield, well, what was happening is they weren't getting the pressure, and the backfield was just getting to know each other, the secondary, in the first couple of games. And when you're playing aggressively and you're not getting pressure, and the guy has too much time, you're going to get beat deep. You're going to get beat on the seams all the time in any level of football. And that's what was happening early, but they brought that together, and teams could run on them. Now they've seemed to have solved that. We'll see a little bit more when they play Montreal, who is his best running back in the league by far. Now, if they can, but they did well again. They're the only team that's done well against that running back all year. The only one that's basically held them to under 100. Somebody else had them to 82. But I mean, back-to-back games, I think he said 270 yards or something. So they've shored up their run a little bit. I think they're still, if they have a weakness, it's against the run. But if you stop somebody in this game with 2 downs and you stop them for less than 6 yards on the first down, they got to throw. And then the other stuff comes into play, which is their very, very strong defensive line. They're starting to get sacks now too, which they didn't for the first half of the season. So the answer is yes, they have an awful lot of depth to overcome things. They've got trouble on the offensive line. There hasn't been enough continuity there. And even some of the players they put into certain positions weren't working out. So they're just tinkering with that a little bit. And they were without their deep threats. Hamilton, why they were so exciting, why they were the Seattle Seahawks, were the Kansas City Chiefs, was they could stretch the field with Speedy Banks, who was the most valuable player, most outstanding player, we call him in our league. And then he was hurt for 3 games. The quarterback, they were down to the third quarterback, so they had to play a ball control game, not just don't throw it away. We'll try to win it somewhere else, which they did. I mean, their defense outscored Ottawa's offense last week, 7-0, and so now they've got them back. They got him and Braylon Addison, who was the number 2 receiver. So this could be a whole different ball game, and not necessarily the ball game, Reid, but what you see on the field could be very, very different here. This could be the first time they've really hit some high octane, except, they've only had 3 practices together with everybody back together.
It's just weird because, it's like Hamilton, even last year, they were the heavy favorites, right? Winnipeg wins or 2 years ago, but last season, now, they come out, right? They lose the home opener, right? And then it's like, does that galvanize them? They've had all these issues with the quarterback. I mean, you're obviously in the market with the players, talking with all them. I mean, what is the feeling there in the locker room?
Galvanize is a really good word. Galvanize is really, really, really good word. But I think there's quiet confidence. They've reestablished home field advantage 2 years ago. They won every game at home. They won 9 at home. There was an exhibition game, but they, of course, half the team, 90% of the team wasn't playing start of the season. So they won all 9 home games, and then they won the playoff game here to go. And this place, when it first opened, the new field, Tim Hortons Field, in 2014, yes, they won every game that year once they got in. So they won their first 10 games here, and it was dominant. I mean, Hamilton's always been a good hometown, partly because it's a bit like Oakland that way. It's the fans, it doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, you change personalities when you walk into the stadium, like you do in many, many stadiums. But this one's pretty insane. Even when they weren't drawing well, that hardcore of this. So they've established home field advantage, and they got a lot of confidence about that. The other part of this is they've been pretty good since 2013. They were like the Chicago Bears. They had to spend a whole year on the road, playing on the road, but they also had to practice not at their own stadium, unlike Chicago in those years. They were playing their home games out. It was really amazing. And they made it to the Grey Cup that year, 2013. From that period on, and there's still 4 players left from that team, and about 5 or 6 that have been here 6 or 7 years. Many of those years, they started 0-2, 0-3, 1-4, and 1 year 0-6. And made the playoffs, or 0-5 and made the playoffs. So to lose the first 2 games this year, you still had that. There's been a bit of a DNA that's been passed down to say, doesn't matter what we do now, as long as we do it later. Well, they're at the later now. And because it's halfway through, we always say the season doesn't start here till Labor Day. It wasn't fair this year because Labor Day wasn't halfway through the season like it normally is, but they are halfway through the season. Now, this is when it really starts, and they have 5 home games to finish out of their 7. And they only get on an airplane 1 more time. So that you buy extra time when you're not on airplanes. The only home game, away game, other than having to fly to Edmonton, is in Toronto, and you can walk there. So,
do you feel confident this weekend, Alouettes? It's been a little bit of a roller coaster this year, right? Vernon Adams, all these. How are you feeling about the matchup here on Saturday afternoon?
Well, of course, I don't. Ostensibly don't care, right? I mean, it's I'm here to watch it and to analyze it and to opine on it. But if I were them, I'd be confident, partly because now it's whether this offense can get up to that kind of speed and what they're going to try to do, because Montreal is very, very porous on defense at the moment, right? Montreal is, but they're also it's incredible. It's their second down conversion rate. I mean, their failure on second down, there's nobody close to how few times they fail on second down. There's nobody close in the league to Montreal that way. They're mercurial. And so you got to make sure, I think, that you get to them, stop that running game. And part of the reason you in any football, one great way to stop a consistent running game is to get a lead, right? So I think Hamilton recognizes they're going to have to score more points than they have the last two games, but it's also, I mean, they're not using their third quarterback. He'll be in there at points because he can run, and that adds a different dynamic. But it's a very, very, if you can stretch the field at all, which Hamilton hasn't been able to do much this year, partly because at first the guys weren't getting open. They didn't have Braylon Addison playing, but partly because the quarterbacks weren't doing very well. Even the 1 and 2 quarterback, Evans or Mazzoli, and then Evans became one. And none of them, they weren't really succeeding except for one game at stretching the field by hitting guys down the seams and that kinds of thing. And the guys weren't getting open as much. Well, if they can do that, they're going to score a lot of points. They'll score an awful lot of points. But Montreal, if Montreal's defense can do anything, or Hamilton turns the ball over, or that kind of, or field position, it ends up establishing a little bit of imbalance there. Vernon can put up some stuff. I mean, everybody here knows Vernon. He was here. He was basically the reason. Dane Evans. He was cut essentially for Dane Evans. Everybody thinks it was because Johnny Manziel was here at the time. That wasn't it. This was about the third quarterback, and that was either between Vernon and. In fact, Vernon became. I don't know if people know this or care about this a little bit of trivia. He became briefly a receiver in Hamilton because he could tell that Dane Evans was going to beat him out, and so he asked to change to receiver, and then they ended up. That didn't work out. It only lasted a day or two, and then he ended up being cut, right, and then ended up in Montreal, and he's landed on his feet well. He should be proud of himself.
Is Dane back in the lineup now? Is it still Watford?
No, he was 4 to 6 weeks, right, and it's an oblique injury. I haven't talked to Dane in a little while. They usually, the injured players, you don't see them out on the field, and because of the pandemic restrictions, we don't have. I'm not even going to run into him by accident because we're restricted to what parts of the stadium we can go on. I can't go on the field to talk to the players. I can't go in the locker room 2 or 3 times a week. I'm not on the sidelines after practice like I have been for 40 years or 35 years. So I don't even know, how he's progressing with that oblique injury, but they're not going to push it. I mean, he's probably, if they, choose to, well, he will be. He's the quarterback of the future here because of his age and of the present as well. So I don't think they want to mess with it.
I want to get your thoughts on this last game, and I want to ask you this question just to get your reaction to before we let you go. So Lions, Blue Bombers, right? Friday night, game of the week. I have a standing bet with Hall of Famer Milt Stegall that if the BC Lions, I'm calling them America's CFL team because we're the American-based CFL podcast. If they beat the Blue Bombers, Milt Stegall needs to change his Twitter profile to a BC Lions logo for a week. How do you feel about my chances and the BC Lions' chances against the Blue Bombers as someone that's covered this league for decades?
Well, I think the defensive line is probably, Mike Riley in the last 2 years has just taken a pounding. He is the toughest guy. He was the last quarterback. We had a year of the fallen quarterback, I called it 2019. Every single team lost their starting quarterback for a significant, but he was the last one to go down. And he should have been the first with the kind of pounding that he took. He was getting nailed. That's where I think the problem is. But I really Winnipeg's due for a bad one, don't you think? As I said, they've got the best combination offensive defensive line, but they get Mike any kind of protection. The way he's connecting right now with Whitehead, and he's got some other weapons there. It could be I think you've got a chance. I wouldn't take the bet. I still think that Winnipeg at this point, just because of their continuity, they haven't really had the big injuries because of the middle linebacker and because of Andrew Harris can pound the bejabbers out of the ball. And, the running game sets up everything else, and Andrew can do it. They can stop him to some degree, and I think they can. But they need to buy another, 3/4 of a second for Mike. If they get that 3/4 of a second, he can beat them.
Reid Wilkins gave the Lions a 7% chance of winning, and I almost threw him off the show. So you have done you have done it. You've given.
I don't think it's as low as 7, but it's not a whole bunch into double digits. If you were to take it on pure face value, but this is the CFL, and now normally in 18-game season, you see 2 or 3 flat games by every team. Don't know if we're going to see that with a 14, like where you're going to see it is when you don't get the rest because the 14-game schedule made, and because it was late and stadiums were always booked for some other things when they had to change their schedule from 18 to 14. They had to make some adjustments. So there have been some compacting period, but I don't think either team is suffering from that either. So you're not going to see, it's not like if there's 3-day rest or anything like that, right? So if it goes to form, Winnipeg still just, again, unless they have injuries, somewhere in the trenches. They're just better in the trenches.
Well, Steve, I appreciate you coming on and playing along with all these shenanigans and spending some time today. I really appreciate you.
Well, thanks for doing it. It's great. Anything that, we love our game here and we love the NFL game and we're very proud of our game. And it's nice to see people Southside take the same kind of like for it that you have.
Yeah, we're doing that. We call it, we're doing the Lord's work is what we call it. So Steve, thank you so much again. And we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks.